Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production Grid YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 176, and today's episode, well, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Volume 4, which of course is the fourth full-length album from the legendary Black Sabbath. Released back in September 25th of 1972 through both Warner Brothers Records, at least in the American markets and probably Canadian markets. Maybe could have been Vertigo too for the Canadian markets. Can't really, I'm not that great in a lot of the different pressing labels, whatever, for Volume 4, but at least I know that Vertigo for sure was at least the primary European market. So there you go. So, since we are celebrating this album again, it already reached its 5th anniversary since yesterday. You know what I have to do. Let's just get into the meat of the matter. Let's get into Volume 4. So, to go through at least, yes, for this part, I'm kind of just going to phone it in for a bit, so bear with me. So yeah, I'm phoning shit in for this one. Whoop-de-doo. But at least I'm upfront about the fact I'm going to phone it in by reading shit off of Wikipedia, while some people, they'll just either go, yeah, just do it on your Wikipedia page or shit like that. But me, I'm going to be upfront with you that I will read the Wikipedia page and stuff. Not because I don't know my shit, but it's just to get certain little things in here and for so on, even though I know everyone's probably read all like the history and stuff that's probably been documented in biography books and documentaries about possibly the recording of Volume 4, whether it be in like Tony Iommi's book or Ozzy's book or whatever, maybe for Gil Ward or Geezer Butler. I think almost every one of them have released biography books, but it's all been probably telltaled in every single documentary. It's been even in articles probably around the time of the recording of Volume 4. But for this episode's sake, I'm just going to phone it in and read it through it. And yes, I'm definitely not shy about the fact that I'm going to be phoning some of this in. But when it comes to the actual part where I'm just going to go through my experience and just years of listening to this album, that part is going to be all non-phoned in. I'm going to actually be very genuine about that. So there we go. Let's just get on with it, because this is going to be a pretty long one. For all I know, it's going to be pretty long. So hopefully all of you at least have some sort of snacks, beverages, and hopefully right now we're kind of still battling with a little bit of heat, even though it's all finally starting to cool down a bit. But for those around areas in the United States or even maybe in Europe, then again, it's probably much more cooler in the European areas. Hopefully everyone, at least in the American areas in the United States that are still kind of dealing with heat, hopefully all of you also have your air conditioning on or some fans. So kick back and enjoy. So here we go. Though the production of Volume 4 is officially credited to Black Sabbath and Patrick Meehan, the bulk of the actual production was performed by Tony Iommi. According to Ozzy Osbourne in 1972, it's the first album we've produced ourselves. Previously, we had Roger Bain as a producer, and although he's very good, he didn't really feel what the band was doing. It was a matter of communication. This time, we did it with Patrick, our manager, and I think we're all very happy. It was great to work in an American studio, because this was actually recorded in, let me kind of go back up a bit. Shit, I think somehow my mouse has a problem responding in a way. It would kind of die itself here a bit. It's ridiculous. But it was recorded at the record plant in Los Angeles, which has also been a home for a lot of live and studio stuff as well, for like UFO and Robin Trower, which I've got some albums. For Robin Trower's The Bridge of Sighs reissue from like the late 90s or something, that's got actual recordings of him, live at the record plant. And of course I got the UFO deluxe edition of Force It, which has a whole entire disc that was recorded live at the record plant. But this was being used for studio purposes, for recording Volume 4. Now, Mihan had little actual involvement in the album's production, but nonetheless insisted he had been listed as a producer, according to Iommi. The recording was plagued with problems, many due to substance abuse. In the studio, the band regularly had speaker boxes full of cocaine delivered. Obviously, because of it's probably gonna come up here. If not, I'll probably just say that's why they almost wanted to title this album Snowblind. But because that song has a lot of references to the word cocaine, obviously the label rejected the idea, so therefore they just titled it Black Sabbath Volume 4. Even though on most of these CD reissues of the album it will be titled Volume 4, but in a way like with Deep Purple and Rock or Rainbow Rising, it's all probably meant to be one title and not really like one supposed to be separate. Like Deep Purple and Rock is somehow these days separate as in Rock, so, and Rising is Rainbow, whatever fucking shit is that. But really, this was meant, that's why they titled it Black Sabbath Volume 4. Struggling to record Cornucopia after sitting in the middle of the room just doing drugs, drummer Bill Ward feared that he was about to be fired. According to him, I hated the song. There was some patterns that were just horrible. I nailed it in the end, but the reaction I got was the cold shoulder from everybody. It was like, well, just go home. You're not being any of use right now, is what he was meaning here. I felt like I'd blown it. I was about to get fired. According to the book, How Black Was Our Sabbath. Ward was always a drinker, but rarely appeared drunk. Retrospectively, that might have been a danger sign. Now, his self-control was clearly slipping. Iommi claims in his autobiography from that Ward had almost died after a prank gone wrong during recording. The Bel Air mansion the band was renting belonged to John DuPont, and the band found several spray cans of gold DuPont paint in a room of the house. Finding Ward naked and unconscious after drinking heavily, they proceeded to cover the drummer in gold paint from head to toe. God dang it. Fucking hell. In his autobiography, I Am Ozzy, Osbourne speaks at length about the sessions. In spite of all the arsing around, musically, those few weeks in Bel Air were the strongest we'd ever been. Besides all, the substance abuse and possibly Bill Ward fucking shit up, creatively or musically. But he admits. Eventually, we started to wonder where the fuck all the coke was coming from. That coke was the whitest, purest, strongest stuff you could ever imagine. One sniff, and you were the king of the universe. During obviously, I don't even want to attempt speaking or saying this stuff or trying to do my best Ozzy impression while saying all this stuff. I don't know if I'll do a good job. You probably can tell how all this stuff is coming out from Ozzy. So, during a show in support of Volume 4 at the Hollywood Bowl, the cocaine abuse caught up to Iommi. Tony had been coked literally for days. We all had. But Tony had gone over the edge. He walked off the stage and collapsed, said Ozzy. During soundcheck earlier that same day, a crazed Christian man attempted to storm the stage and stab Iommi with a dagger, but he was tackled by members of the band's crew. According to Butler, we wanted to take a break at that point. So there we go. I guess maybe I should bring this up too, since this is kind of still even, that stuff might have been during the time that this album had been released. Yeah, it says, again, rereading, it was in support of Volume 4 where that incident took place. But there's at least something that does take place before, the release, whatever, or the recording of Volume 4 that I can bring up here too. That's on this, the Wikipedia page. And then I'll just go into my overall very great thoughts about Volume 4. So there we go. Osbourne also recounts the band's ongoing anxiety over the possibility of being busted, which worsened after they went to the cinema to see The French Connection. about undercover New York. Yeah, it's the movie with, what's his fucking name? God dang it. I'm starting to lose certain actors' names out here, but they'll probably come up. I know, directed by William Friedkin, Gene Hackman, and Roy Scheider. There we go. Those are the only two that can really, I was trying to think of when this movie, I've seen bits of it, though it's been a long time since I've seen really anything from the French Connection. But from what I remember, it's a pretty fun or very cool, great early 70s movie. So again, Ozzy recalled, I was hyperventilating in a 2013, probably around the time they were trying to promote the 13 album. Butler admitted to Mojo magazine that heroin too had entered the picture. We sniffed it. We never shut up. I didn't realize how nuts things had gotten until I went home and the girl I was with didn't recognize me. Whew. Alright, so there we go. I gotta take a break anyways from all of that. I don't want to go any further. But I read as much what I can. I think it's all the bullet points and all the stuff that's probably worth even mentioning in this review or Album of the Week episode. So there we go. So on September 25th of 1972, it gets released through both Vertigo and Warner Brothers. And therefore, we have Volume 4, the fourth album from Black Sabbath, following 1971's Master of Reality. And Master of Reality, of course, again, the final album to ever be produced by Roger Bain, before obviously around the time he would be starting doing stuff with the band Budgie. There we go. So, what are my actual thoughts on Volume 4? Well, again, since this is the most genuine part of the episode, all I can say is that I've lived with, listening to this album since I was very little kid in the mid or early 2000s, possibly around, probably close to 20 years now at this point. It's been a little over 20 years, whatever. But you know what? Actually could be almost close to 20 years. As I'm looking at it, we're in 2022, and I probably heard this in possibly December of 2003. So it has to be around that time, and I can just tell you, I listened to this album a lot. What's funny is that my brother was given this album as a Christmas gift while I was given a copy of Sabotage. And that's how I heard Sabotage. Again, they were both given out as Christmas gifts from our dad because he was a huge Black Sabbath fan, especially the Ozzy era stuff, and he obviously had this on record as well. And if I was still living up in Susanville, I probably would have been listening to this album on record for this Album of the Week episode than just going through my original CD copy, at least that ended up becoming my CD copy of Volume 4, because eventually my brother ended up giving me this copy, so in replace of going after that, the Ozzy Years box set that came out at this point, a very long time ago, that set, which is now probably a very highly collector's item now. But again, I just had everything from the first time up to Never Say Die, and maybe a DVD, whatever that was included. It was a really giant, long box set with all the eight albums in there. So, but since then, I've spent years and years listening to this album, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I was very more partial to Sabotage than I actually was to Volume 4. Now, prior to this, the only albums I heard that was Black Sabbath was Dehumanizer, the first album, Paranoid, and Technical Ecstasy. Those are the only albums I really had heard that was Black Sabbath. So Sabotage and Volume 4 were really one of the newest ones I heard at the time. And I was more partial to Sabotage than I was Volume 4. I can never tell you what was the main reason, what kept me from liking, or at least really enjoying more of Volume 4. I can never really tell you why. Exactly. I don't even have very good answers for why it took me so long to really get into this album. I guess you can say this took a long time to creep up on me, and eventually several years ago, I ended up, re-listening to Volume 4, and all of a sudden I'm just like, why didn't I not like this album first in like 2003 or 2004? Why didn't I? This is a fucking great record. Okay, I'm gonna get a bit. This might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion, and I don't hate the song that's on this record. I don't hate it. I mean, I can read through the track listing right now because we got what? Wheels of Confusion / The Straightener, because basically, again, Black Sabbath was still kind of coming off still the heels, and they were still kind of continuing this a bit. The sort of slight progressive songwriting, and you kind of, that really goes all the way back to the first record, because the very first record had a lot of sort of slight prog leanings a little bit, though not in the way you expect like a Yes or a King Crimson, for that matter, you know, or like a Pink Floyd. But it's just the way with the how it's almost a different song within a song, and it was different. They did that, and it was definitely in a way still very proggy, though not very psychedelic, but it just had that same thing. It was just in a much more heavier way, like a more heavy rock way, and then like just a traditional kind of, you know, we're trying to do jazz kind of prog in a way that you kind of expect from like a Yes or a King Crimson, or even to an extent like Jethro Tull, whatever. But this one was just their way of doing proggy interludes or proggy stuff was just done in a more heavier hard rock kind of way, and not just, you know, what you expect from like the aforementioned prog bands at the time. But it was still kind of prog leanings, and it continued into Paranoid, but it started to creep a little bit away in like Master of Reality, because Master of Reality, now I even say again, including Volume 4, and I think that's one of the reasons why I ended up really getting into Volume 4 a lot more, was when I really started getting into a lot like the Doom bands, like Witchfinder General and Pentagram, and even like St. Vitus and all those bands, who are really kind of were hugely inspired, at least by Black Sabbath. And I would definitely say especially like Master of Reality and Volume 4. These obviously were the big templates for a lot of the Doom stuff in like the early 80s, and especially in the late 80s and the 90s. These were very much, you can tell, were big inspirations. But the beginning and they were kind of continuing a little bit that style from the first three records, but this is definitely also a slight transition. I'll get into that at some point here, but just to continue on, we get into like what Tomorrow's Dream, Changes, FX, Supernaut, Snowblind, Cornucopia, Laguna Sunrise, St. Vitus Dance, and then finally ending, of course, Under the Sun / Every Day Comes and Goes. So in a way, it kind of caps off with another sort of similar kind of 1-2 kind of track that's just all at least what's the best word I can use, that is squished, I guess you can say, into one song, you know, compressed into one track. And they did that, and again, that's still continuing off what they were doing with the first three records, especially the first two. Like, again, look at all the stuff on, like, the first album and Paranoid. So, like, it's still kind of, they're still continuing that, but it's a transition to what they'll end up doing afterwards. And that's really responsible with the song like FX, which I almost look at FX, and especially when I really went and re-listened to it, especially after years later after really getting into, like, the rest of the Dio era stuff, like Heaven and Hell and the Mob Rules, especially where I kind of make this with the Mob Rules, is that FX to me is like a precursor to that one track. I'm going to try and bring it up again because I'm starting to lose the name of this song. But it's off of Mob Rules again. I've somehow, the more that I'm starting to get older here, I mean, I'm like, 27 years old. And I'm starting to be getting to lose a little bit of memory of things in a way. I'm starting to. I don't know how, but I'm not getting as great of a memory as I probably did 5 or 6 years ago. It's crazy, but it's just the way that it is. So certain things are starting to kind of disappear from me, but I do exactly know what track I'm thinking of. There we go, finally. The E5 150 track off of the Mob Rules. I think FX to me is like a precursor to that, even though it's just probably Tony Iommi fucking around on his guitar in a way with the, again, obviously messing around with probably his really early, one of the most early effects pedals back then. But he's just messing around with that, with just doing little things that's like very it's very atmospheric and a little bit avant-garde like. He's just doing that kind of stuff on his guitar. It's just that I've done this around when I fucked around on my I'll fuck around on my guitar, like especially on my PV Viper amp, and where it's just all the effects stuff and everything on there. And I would just, whenever I'm playing around, especially with the reverb and stuff, obviously I'll here and there I'll do stuff and it ends up basically recreating a little bit of like effects off this record. But I feel like this is kind of a precursor to that, and eventually goes into a super knot. Which again, I love the song when I first heard it. Anyways, to tell you the truth, some of the songs I really liked when I first heard it around was definitely Super Knot. And I would say Cornucopia, even though there was issues with Bill Ward, at least had when recording this track. But I never could get any of the issues why he got, because of, in a way, you wouldn't even think that there were any issues being displayed at all within the recording of Cornucopia, because of it still plays seamlessly. You know, it's just so still performed great. You can't even tell that that Bill Ward was messing up at all during the recording and everything. You couldn't. I don't know how many takes they had, but it's just you could never tell. Because of it, it's still come across as seeming. They, for all I know, they probably picked the best version or the best recording of this track. That's like the less issues, you know. That's just that the less problems, and that just didn't come across as purely sloppy on air. But there's other songs I liked. Even Under the Sun / Every Day Comes and Goes was a song I really loved as well. Especially later on when I really started listening to this record, it was just one of those where I really latched onto. I was like, I couldn't. And still, for 72, I couldn't believe that a record this heavy was released in 1972. This is really up there also as one of Black Sabbath's heaviest records, made alongside Master of Reality. So like these two are probably Black Sabbath's most heaviest records, and Black Sabbath are basically considered like the creators of heavy metal. And there's some heavy shit on this record. But again, I also come across in like songs like Tomorrow's Dream and even Snowblind. I've eventually ended up, really appreciating. St. Vita's Dad's probably the closest really you can get to like a more happy kind of energetic kind of song. It's a little bit kind of a happy kind of rocker. And again, it's still not bad. It's still enjoyable. But it's just the closest really to a more happy kind of song. I would say the only song on the record, and I mean, I'm not going to come across I hate the song, but to me, it's probably the one song that kind of breaks a bit of the pacing of this record. It kind of breaks the mood of the album, because of right when you're beginning off with songs like Wheels of Confusion / The Straightener and Tomorrow's Dream, you're then all of a sudden are just treated to Changes, which is definitely the first ballad in Black Sabbath's history, and in a way, you can say that it kind of foreshadows some of Ozzy Osbourne's leanings later on, especially in his solo career. You really could tell this is going to be a big elephant when it comes to these guys' career. I mean, after this, Black Sabbath really started doing some more. They definitely started doing some more ballads. But really, when you get into Ozzy's solo stuff, you start to hear more songs like Changes. So it's like this really did more for Ozzy than I think it was doing for any of the rest of the band, because I think pretty much the rest of the band wanted to continue doing shit like Tomorrow's Dream and Supernaut and Cornucopia and Under the Sun and all these heavy songs. They want to still do this stuff. They don't want to do a whole lot of stuff like Changes. I know there's probably a couple of ballads in there, here and there during like the Glenn Hughes stuff. Basically the stuff that kind of was more so considered Tony Iommi's solo records, especially when you get into like the Tony Martin era stuff. But those ballads were more kind of dark kind of ballads. Not like something that's like kind of very somber and very melancholic like Changes. Because this is just Ozzy on... and for all I know, I don't know who was doing the piano on this one. I can look up again. Whatever. Was it just Ozzy on a piano? It was actually Tony Iommi. So it's basically just Ozzy and Tony Iommi basically on this track. And it's definitely not a bad song. But when you're putting it in the middle between like Wheels of Confusion slash The Straightener, and of course Supernaut and Snowblind, it really kind of breaks up the pace a bit. It really kind of breaks up the record, and it's a little bit of a kind of a pet peeve. It's the same thing I got with Ozzy. He did the same shit with Blizzard of Oz by putting in Goodbye to Romance, which is not a bad ballad by any means, and I have no problem with it. I got some sentiments towards that song. But again, you're putting that song in between the two opening rockers on the album, that being, you know, I Don't Know and Crazy Train, even though I don't know if I want to hear Crazy Train another fucking time, you know. But still, you're putting it in between that and Suicide Solution. And then, of course, I know there's a similar pattern between this album and Blizzard of Oz, which is funny. But it's still kind of ironic. Because, again, after it changes, it goes into like a little short kind of instrumental track. And then into a great rocker and like Supernaut. Same thing with Blizzard of Oz. After Goodbye to Romance, you get that little guitar acoustic instrumental that was Randy Rhoads, you know, the D track. And it goes into like Suicide Solution. How shit mirrors each other, you know? So, same thing happens with Volume 4. Though I'll be quite honest, I'll actually kind of put Volume 4 over like Blizzard of Oz. Not that I don't like Blizzard of Oz, but it's just that I get more mileage out of Volume 4 than I do Blizzard of Oz. Just because of Volume 4 is more of my wheelhouse than Blizzard of Oz. However, I am in love to death with Diver Madman. That's still my absolute favorite Ozzy solo record. There you go. But again, there's still some great freaking tracks on this album. It's still a heavy record. And again, you can tell this definitely might be more self-produced. But there's just some great stuff. I do have to say that the Under the Sun / Everyday Comes and Goes track is pretty much, in a way, kind of it's a bit of a sequel to Into the Void, because it's got a similar sort of composition. It starts off kind of slow a bit like that, a little bit though, probably a little bit faster, a little more galloping to an extent than like Into the Void, but it's got a similar middle section where all of a sudden it builds into more like a speed metal kind of track. But with Under the Sun, the sort of speed metal middle section of this track is almost kind of pre-Motorhead like, because of it's just like for 1972, it's just crazy how fast and heavy anything can sound in this period. I mean, the minute Deep Purple probably released something like freaking Fireball, and all of a sudden afterwards, almost every band's trying to outdo one another in the speed department, and they're just making shit that, well, let's see how fast we can get. Budgie, what the following year we'll do like Bread Fan. There you go. But there's just not really a bad song for me on here, maybe besides Changes, but that's mostly because of where you place the song. If it was placed a little bit more closer to the end, maybe I can give it a pass. But you're putting in the middle between two great fucking tracks, and it kind of just breaks up the moment. It just breaks up the pacing for me. So there you go. That's just where we're going to end things there. Again, it's a classic record from beginning to end. I don't really need to recite anything afterwards, but I think everyone has all read like the history stuff about the recordings and everything afterwards, you know, that leads into the next record, which again, that would be Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Do need to bring it up though, that this is definitely a transitional record for me. I feel like, or at least I feel that this is a transitional record because this is a transition from the early sound, basically the first three records, into what they'll end up doing afterwards. And that begins with like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and then Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy. It's kind of the beginning of that. But it just starts to creep in on here. But you can tell it starts to end up being more developed by Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which again, another album I forgot to mention as far as albums I heard before I really heard, Volume 4 and Sabotage. There you go. So that's it. Again, celebrating what such a monumental classic record from these guys. And again, fourth album in, and it still is some great high quality early heavy metal from 1972. It's a heavy record, of course, and again, deserving of the sort of the accolades I think that it deserves. Even though there's probably some slight sloppiness, it's still a even more energetic record than probably some of the ones even before. You can just tell they're trying to get more tighter as a band, even with all the substance abuse that's been kind of going on, at Black Sabbath at this point. But they still pulled off a great record in the beginning. They still did. There we go. So that's it. So for anyone that's probably lived with this record and then listened to it and probably placed it at the altar of their all-time favorite heavy metal records, or even just at the altar of the metal genre, or next to, or at least if they've got themselves an altar in their personal record room where they got like maybe the first couple of other Black Sabbath records, and they'll probably have, let's say, a Judas Priest, like Scream for Vengeance, or Stained Class, or whatever else record they got there, or Iron Maiden, and Motorhead, and fucking other records they got there, maybe Venom. They probably got this record there, and that means you probably spent years, just as me, listening to it, probably, even though for you it's probably much more longer than me. So if you have any sort of positive or negative comments about Volume 4, you can leave them in the comment section below. But if you've never listened to Volume 4, you have no business pressing on to this video. You had no business because of, I'm just going to right now, if you made it this far, you're an idiot. Because of, you probably should have been listening to this album before you ever pressed on this video. But then again, you might be pressing on this video because you have listened to Volume 4. But if there's anyone that was stupid enough to press on this video and made it this far without ever listening to this record and never even heard a lick of it and didn't even know that it even existed, I'm just going to tell you, you should stop it right now. And you should have stopped it right now and should have went on whether Amazon or your local record store to find yourself a copy of Volume 4. Because definitely you deserve to at least listen to this record. It's one of the most pioneering records of the heavy metal genre in general. So there you go. I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.